How are you,
Yeah,
sir?
huh?
How are you,
I'm
sir?
fine. I am fine. I was telling my wife that if we still lived in California, I would have already been down to visit you,
Yep, that is sure. That's true.
but it's
How are
kind
things
of a
been?
hard hop, skip, and a jump from here.
Yeah. How you been?
I've been fine. Been
Yeah,
working
awesome.
on. I've uh, decided I'm going to write a book about the inner savage,
Mhm.
and it's going to be called "In Search of the Inner Savage."
There you go.
And I've been doing some research and I've come up with some really interesting stuff. And I've found out what the inner savage is.
And then people are gonna have to read the book to find out, right?
Yeah. I can tell you, I'll when it's done, I'll get you a copy. But based on everything that I found, I've heard of this stuff over the years about we have an inner savage, we have a primal personality buried way in our brain, we have a reptilian brain, and all of this kind of stuff that's quite primal, and that sometimes the beast just comes out and we can't control it.
Mhm.
And so, based on everything that I've been researching, quite a bit about the fight or flight response, which I finally saw somebody that named it almost correctly, because I said, well, there's a real main portion that should be there, and that's fight, flight, or freeze, because most people freeze.
Yeah.
And so I saw somebody actually mention that. So that's out there, which I'm glad. But the term fight isn't really correct either, because people will get a an adrenaline response and either freeze or do something, but it might not have anything to do with fighting. It might be there's a house on fire and there's someone that needs to be saved, and you get the adrenaline in your system and you freeze because you're afraid, but you freeze. It's not because of fighting. It has to do with acting,
Mm.
doing something. And so it should be acting, running, or freezing is the what it should be, but they stick to the fight or flight thing, and I guess that's not going to change because they've been doing it since some guy came up with that phrase in 1920.
Yeah.
You know,
Rolls off the
so
tongue easy. Well, if you need any direction where I mean, you've already written books. Well, we'll get into that, all of that. But I could direct you to my publisher if you want. Um,
yeah, well, I got your book, so I know who your publisher is.
yeah.
Yeah, and my wife said that she belongs to some kind of organization that uh, does that, prints nonfiction books. I mean, yes, nonfiction
Yeah.
books. They don't do fiction novels, though.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the only reason that I haven't printed any of my things yet, because all I think I mentioned to you, all of these publishers, most of them anymore they're not the traditional publishers. They're the ones that they will charge you money to, thousand anywhere from seven to $15,000 to get your book published and marketed and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in blowing that kind of money and then have it not work.
Yeah.
So I'll just keep plugging along, see if I can pick up a an agent at some point, because that's the thing. Once you get an agent, then you can get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
And I write because I like writing, and so I'm not like beating the drum so I can get my stuff published, so I can say, here, I got something published.
Yeah.
I know I know people that have published stuff and they don't sell anything. So
Well, I
you know,
finally had to turn that in because as you're driving, so once I started thinking about writing a book, I just kept thinking, "Oh, this would be a great chapter. This would be a great chapter. This would be."
right,
And I'm like, "I gotta
right.
stop. I gotta let that be book 2. Let me get this out of the world," because, as we talked before, we're always thinking about this stuff. We're always having different scenarios and how would you do this? How would you do that? And the book could just go endless, right? But eventually you gotta close it, stay done, and move on.
Yeah. Well, I actually, because I'm a really good typist, and I write books a different way. I get the idea in my mind, and I will kind of flesh them out on paper to kind of know which direction I'm going.
Mhm.
But what I usually do is I start off by writing my ending, and then I make everything aim towards that ending. But I'm not a reader. I don't read much, but I love
Really?
movies. So what I do is when I come up with my storyline, I play it in my head as a movie, and I sit there and type it as I'm watching the movie
Yeah.
in my head, and
Well,
and that's just how I go.
I've thought about that because there's some really I am a big reader. I love to read. To me, I geek out. Like my ultimate goal is to have a huge library in my house one day. But I
Uh,
think about this when I watch movies. I'm like, oh, I didn't see that happening. I didn't see that. They must start with the ending and reverse engineer all these different characters that come in their life because
right,
that was a way out left field, like it totally
right,
different direction. And I've thought
yeah,
about that. I'm like, yeah, they probably start with, and the guy dies on the hill, and then all the
right,
people he meets along the way, because otherwise
right.
you couldn't just write it like day one. Bob wakes up. Oh, and then he meets this person. And then he meets no, you know the end game, and then you just
Right,
unravel it, reverse engineer it
right.
from there. So I've thought
When
about
when
that many times of like
yeah,
how crazy stories get. I'm like, oh, they must have had the end game already written down
right.
somewhere in
What
their
what
head.
what kind of stuff do you like to read?
I like a lot of spy stuff. This is we talked about this while we were talking on the phone, but Left of Bang, When Violence is the Answer, Gift of Fear, that I think you read as well.
Right,
Uh,
I have a whole bunch of those books.
yeah, Don Winslow is talking about his fiction. He wrote like that movie Savages, where
Right,
the drug dealer from actually Laguna Beach and the cartel. He has a lot of a good what are they series? Yeah, Jack
right.
Carr, who does all the he, they just made a TV Amazon Prime about Chris Pratt plays him, James Reese. So they're this is like the seventh or eighth one. I'm trying to Terminal List. So this is
Okay,
that series. He's an ex Navy SEAL and he became a writer afterwards.
okay.
But I like that those kind of books, like spy novels, The Bourne Supremacy. I read all those books.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
The movies always, I like the movies as well. But my wife's like, "That was a really good movie." I'm like, "You should read the book." But
Yeah, I always hear that, that the movies are never as good as the book, you know?
never
But, the few books that I've read a couple Tom Clancy's.
very
I
good.
read I read Hunt for Red October, and I read, the one about China, Red Storm Rising, which is about 4 inches thick. I read that one twice.
Yeah,
And I read this cool book called Saucer, where somebody found a flying saucer buried in the desert in Iran or somewhere like that.
yeah,
And I used that idea for the last book that I did was about some 20-something-year-old friends found a flying saucer buried in the ground in Texas on this kid's property. His dad's a billionaire, and they ended up digging it out and it still worked. And so they went flying all around in it. And so the government gets involved, and the Chinese come in and steal it from them. And then they get some Navy SEALs and they go back and steal it back from the Chinese. And it was a blast to write. And it's a really fun story because it starts out 5,000 years in the past, where the
how do you find this book?
well, I have it. It's not, because it's not published. But if you're interested, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'm very
It's
interested.
it is the funniest character in the book is the artificial intelligent computer that's in charge of flying the flying saucer. And so
Really?
these kids get in there, and there's no controls or anything, and they sit in the seat, and all of a sudden they hear a voice that says, "Where would you like to go?" And so it kind of goes from there. And when they say, well, let's go here, and so she's okay, she goes, the seat belts on their seats all of a sudden buckle, and she goes, hang on to your asses, this might get gnarly. And it turns out that 5,000 years ago, the reason it was buried was because it got hit by lightning, and it kind of scrambled some of her circuits, including her language. So she says, I'm just letting you know now that I might say some stuff that'll just freak you out, but don't worry about it. That's just because I got damaged.
Yeah.
And so she's like the funniest character in the whole story is this computer. And but it's a fun story. I mean, I've got some characters, historic characters from way in our past that I won't tell you about if you're interested in reading
Yeah,
it.
100%.
Um, I'll go ahead. Yeah, I've got your email, so I will send it to you. And so I wrote 5 novels And the first four I wrote in 2020, and it took me 4 months to write four novels. And
Wow.
it's two-part stories, you know, and so I just blazed through them because I was just had nothing else to do, and like I say, I'm a fast typist, so I was able just to bang them out. But you can't tell that I rushed them. Everyone that's read them says, "Wow, they didn't expect it from me," because I had never really written before, but I'd always wanted. And
Why don't
so
you try
I
to get them made into, like, little movies or something on Netflix or something?
well, yeah, it's who you know, and again, you need an agent for that kind of stuff,
Well,
you
I
know.
ironically enough, I know a guy out in Cabo, in Mexico, and he used to fight in Pride. The
Mhm.
UFC Pride
Right,
was a Japan version of it, and
right.
so a guy wanted us to meet, and so we met, and we started talking about everything else but fighting, and it turns out he's a producer, he makes movies, he does,
Oh, wow.
animation movies and all this, and so we started talking, I said, "Hey, well, come on my podcast and let's talk about your pride fighting." He goes, "I don't wanna talk about fighting, that brings up somebody I don't wanna be a part of anymore, but let's talk about my movies." I'm like, "Okay," and we never coordinated, but I talk to him, we go back and forth every now and then, and I could tell him, "Hey, here's some stories or some I could connect
Yeah,
you to." I could just say that. I could get you guys.
that'd be awesome. Because 'cause I've got the 2 stories that I think are I really like my last one because it's got a twist in the story that'll knock you off your chair.
Yeah.
When you get to the point where I hit you with a twist, you're gonna go, "No friggin' way." It's like, "You gotta be kidding me."
Yeah.
Uh, but the 2 that I think would be the best for, like, either TV movies or an actual series is my one did I mention to you about the LGBT?
Mm-mm.
Well, when I was trying to get my first 2 books published, which are science fiction, everywhere I read in all the different publisher sites was that they were dying for LGBT stories.
Mhm.
And I'm going, "Okay, I can do that." And so I what I did is I came up with a character who was an accountant for the mob in Chicago. His name's Vinny DeLuca, total goomba name. So he takes off with 30 million bucks of the crime boss's money, and he knows they're going to come after him. So he figures the best way to hide, he goes and has the starts the transition surgery to become a woman. And so he gets transformed into this beautiful redhead that's all woman except for down below, still a man because he's
Yeah.
not done yet. Okay. So then he takes off and goes to Oakland, which is I'm familiar with because I was born and raised in that area. And now her name is Nikki Fontaine, opens up a private investigator agency, and she hires a lesbian office manager who's a knockout. She hires a bisexual, purple-haired IT gal. She hires two gay guys to do car repos, and then she hires an in-house attorney who is a coke addict. And so it just kind of goes from there. And I have all these different stories that they have to try and solve. But there's one story that goes throughout the whole book, and it's called The Case of the Lipstick Killer. And I have all kinds of twists and turns, and you will laugh your butt off when you read this because part of it is I try and be realistic. Here's a guy, Vinny, who's now a woman. He's got this beautiful body, and after his surgery, he's standing there looking in the mirror, looking at his boobs, and he goes, "Well, what the hell am I supposed to do with these? Sit around and play with them all day?" you know, and it's got a lot of really funny stuff in it. A lot of it unintended, but it's still funnier than hell. Makes you laugh.
Yeah.
And I think the stories in there. I've got some really interesting stories that they try to solve, along in each book because there's two books. And I think my most interesting one is the beginning of my second book. This guy's driving down the road at 50 miles an hour in his brand new Mustang GT 500. All of a sudden, he hits something and he gets out and goes to look because he didn't remember seeing anything. And he sees some feet sticking out of his grill. He had hit a person, and the guy just went right into his engine compartment. And he's going, "What the hell? Where'd that come?" So that he gets arrested for a DUI because he was barely over, but he swore he was only going 55. They got an accident reconstruction guy that looks at the car and the damage, and calculates that the impact speed was 220 miles an hour. And the guy's going, my car doesn't even go that damn fast, and they were checking it to see if he modified it and stuff. And he goes, I don't know what to tell you. I was going 55. So as it turns out, just to kind of spill the beans a little bit, some drug cartel guys were flying overhead in a plane, and they got one of the guys and threw his butt out of the plane. And he was going like 200 or 180 miles an hour, falling and moving laterally at the same time in perfect timing. He hit the front of that guy's car. So the car's going at 55, but he's doing like 180 from falling and like that. And so it was an impact speed of 220. And so, I string that along as I can for the reader. I don't want to just tell them off the bat, until they finally figure out what happened. And it's pretty interesting stuff.
So are any of these books published?
No, I had 4 of them on Amazon Kindle for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like anything else, if you want to be successful there, you have to do a lot of marketing.
Yeah.
And number 1, I'm not sure how to do it. And number 2, it costs all this money, and I wasn't about to spend all this money not knowing what I'm doing. So we just kind of left it at that for now. And so I've had lots of friends and acquaintances, read them. Anyone that's interested, I send my books to them electronically, and they read them. And I've had 100% positive feedback, but I hope they're being fair, because I tell them, I say, I want you to tell me what you think. So if you see something that I can improve, let me know. I want to improve.
Yeah.
And so I got really good reviews on everyone that's read them so far. But I'll send you that one book as a starter, and if you're interested in any of the others, just let me know, and I can throw those at you.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I love to read. I'm in a good book right now. I don't know where it's at, but it's 620 by Dan Bellucci. Bellucci.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's good. I love to read. So yeah, send me over whatever you can, and I'll
Well,
definitely.
I'll send you all 5 of them if you want, and then you
Yeah,
can take your time and dip into them when you feel like it. You
yeah.
know.
So they're electronic files. I'm old school. I like to read a book. Like my wife, she'll listen to audiobook. My mom and dad, they do Kindles. But however
Well,
you want to get it to me, I'll read it for sure.
okay. Well, if you can get a hold of a Kindle, they're PDFs, so I think those upload into Kindle.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I'll get it done. But that's why I
okay.
want to talk to you. Look, we've already gone through 15 minutes. We just start talking and we get rolling. I love it.
Oh, I didn't think we had started yet.
Oh yeah, we're like Joe Rogan. I just hit record, and then this is what
Oh,
exactly what we did when we started talking. This is why I
uh-huh.
knew we would be good on a podcast, because to let people know. I think you reached out on Instagram or somehow social media and said, "Hey, you read the book, and it sounded like we had a lot in common." So then I reached out and said, "Yeah, let's talk and catch up." And so we talked, I think, for 45 minutes or something. I had to go get my kid, and I said, "Yeah, why don't we just jump on a podcast, continue the conversation?" That's exactly
Yeah,
what we did.
yeah. Because I could talk. The 2 things I could talk about are my books and the stories, and martial arts and self defense.
Yeah.
Those are my 2 passions.
Yeah, so let's roll back that into the martial arts. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found your love for martial arts.
Well, in high school, there were a couple times where I got picked on a little bit, which I wasn't happy about. And I was not bad at boxing. Used to box at the boys' club, but I just wasn't set up to get in fights. I just wasn't like that. And so along comes Bruce Lee in the Green Hornet on TV.
Mhm.
And me and my friends all watched that and said, oh my God. And we were starting to see more martial arts in movies. And so they opened up a karate school in my town, which is Alameda, which is right next to Oakland.
Mhm.
And so me and 2 of my friends decided to go check it out, and we signed up. And our first lesson was August the 4th, 1966. Was my first official karate lesson,
Wow.
and so I started from there and never stopped. And so I've been involved with martial arts and self defense for like 56 years, I think. And I ended up leaving the traditional martial arts after I got my first black belt in 1970, and I wanted to study other things. So over the years, back then you didn't have access to YouTube and everything. So I bought every self-defense or martial arts video I could find. I had like 300. They were all VHS tapes. I mean, yeah, VHS.
Yeah.
And I bought everything out there and I studied I mean, I was studying uh, Japanese, Korean, Okinawan, which is more Japanese, but Hawaiian, Russian martial arts, Indonesian, Filipino, all of those. And over the years, I've had opportunities to study physically with instructors with many of those things, stick fighting, knife fighting, and all of that kind of thing. And I really started veering over towards self-defense. And then in the early 90s, the UFC started.
Hmm.
And so that was just like, oh my God, if I would have been younger, I would have been all up in that.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I was watching uh, the UFC, I think it was number 2 or number 3, and Hoist Gracie was fighting some guy. And this is before weight division, so the other guy was bigger than Hoist. And Hoist was like upside down, holding on to this guy, and they were like against the fence. And I'm thinking, oh, that guy's in trouble. And the announcer says, well, it's just a matter of time now before Hoist gets him. And I go, what the hell is this guy talking about? This
Yeah.
guy, the other guy's got him. He's upside down. He's ready to pound him into the ground. Next thing I know, the guy's tapping out because Hoist put him in some kind of either arm bar or knee bar or something like that.
Yeah.
And I go, what the hell was that? That was my first exposure to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you know?
Yeah.
And so I loved the early UFC because they truly had people from all the different martial arts.
Remember that guy
And
used to wear the one glove, the boxer?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was just so many of them that I really liked. There was one jiu-jitsu guy from Holland or something. He was a bad dude,
Yeah.
and he had several victories. And so I watched for about the first 100. I didn't miss any of them, but then they started just getting too different. It was just nothing but violence, and you started seeing more of these guys showing up with all the tattoos on their body. They look like prison inmates rather than fighters.
Well, there's a
And
champion now at the 170, and he has tats all over his face, and he has pink hair. And I'm like, I want him to lose so bad. He just got it a couple weeks ago. And
yeah,
I'm like, this isn't my style. Like, I'm old school too. I like the Tito, the Chuck Liddells, and now you got
right, right,
guys walking around with tats on their faces, and I don't have
yeah,
any tattoo. Not that I'm against them, but I don't want to watch it. Yeah, I still watch it religiously. I pick and choose what cards I want, but there's
right,
definitely some fighters that I'm like, this doesn't represent to me what I think fighting is.
yeah,
This is like schoolyard dog shit, and I don't like it.
yeah, yeah. But I remember watching, Dan Severin, Dan the Beast Severin,
Yeah,
and then the God, the two brothers, Shamrock,
Frank
Frank
Shamrock and Ken
Frank
Shamrock.
Shamrock, right?
Yeah,
Watching them, and the guy I really like, I think his name was Dan. He came and he was a wrestler,
Dan
and I
Henderson.
think no, another Dan. He kind of invented ground and pound. He was like 265 pounds of nothing but muscle, ex wrestler,
The
and
Roman Greco wrestler, huh?
uh, I think so. But he would just grab him, slam him down on the ground, get on top of him, and just pound him. And
Yeah,
I think he's the guy where they came up with the term ground and pound,
yeah,
because he would I just love this guy because he was just like fearless,
yeah.
and he was just all muscle, and he was fun to watch. But Shamrock, I'm not Shamrock. You just mentioned his name, the other
Tito.
Dan.
Oh, Dan
Not
Henderson.
No, well, Dan Henderson's good too. Who's the guy who used to do the commercials? He shaving
Oh,
his head
Chuck
with
Liddell. Chuck Liddell.
Chuck, yeah, Chuck Liddell. He
Yeah,
was fun to watch. I
yeah,
liked watching him.
yeah.
And so anyway, my last formal martial arts training was in 94, 95, I think into 96. And I ended up getting my fourth degree black belt in Chinese Kempo from that.
Mhm.
And then from that, I totally broke away from traditional martial arts and started focusing on street self defense. And shortly after that, I hooked up with a guy in a seminar who turned out to be a cop, and we decided we knew more about the subject of the seminar than the guys teaching it. So we ended up getting together, and this was in like 1999 when I think I met him, 98 or 99. And so we started training, and we ended up creating a defensive tactics company for police officers, and we named it WarTac. And we got to travel for about 8 years all around the country teaching defensive tactics to police departments, sheriff's departments, uh, uh, prison guards, military police, all over the place. It was a blast. Coast to coast. We went to about 8 different states doing that. And then all the police departments got hit with budget cuts, and that kind of dried up.
Yeah.
And I kept focusing on my self-defense stuff. And my partner is ready to retire as a police officer. He's still doing his training here and there. He was a SWAT guy, so he trains a lot of handgun stuff and building entries and clearing and stuff like. I've helped him a couple times like that. But so I've just been working on the self-defense. And in California, before I moved here about a year and a half or so ago, I had finally got a dojo that I wanted. I had a barn, so I had a totally um, floor matted area that was 24 by 36. I
Mhm.
had all of the equipment, and I was ready to go. And then we decided to move, and so now I'm starting all over again. I've got part of my garage, and I'm going to start doing private lessons. But I'm waiting to get some of the stuff cleared out, and I'm going to focus on savage stuff.
There you go.
And what it is it's because I tell people that nowadays you can't spend too much time evaluating someone who's going to attack you, because it used to be where they didn't all everyone didn't carry weapons.
Mhm.
But nowadays, if someone's out attacking people, you better assume they've got a weapon, and the longer you mess around with them, the more likely it's going to end up in play.
Mhm.
So my thing is to set up the bad guy so his guard is down, and then at the right time, which I show them what that is, you go at him 200%, take him out. You
Mhm.
know,
What were
and
you when you said you and the cop branched off and started teaching more? Because I believe, well, I'll give you my opinion after yours, but what was the seminar guy training or teaching versus what you guys went and taught?
he was teaching gun disarms,
Mhm.
and like someone's holding a rifle at you, and what he would show you to do, you got your hands up, and you would take your right hand, sweep it under the rifle, and then back over and grab the barrel, hoping he's not going to see you doing that and start filling you with lead.
That's a
You
lot of
know,
movement before,
that's
all
that's a lot of movement, right? And
yeah,
so we saw that, and we said this will just get you killed.
yeah.
And so we started off doing gun disarms, and then we got into unarmed versus knife. Then we got into defensive tactics,
Mhm.
and um, then we kind of got into everything else. And he actually got certified as an instructor with a guy named Kelly McCann. Have you ever heard of him?
Mm-mm.
He he teaches Muay Thai and self defense and stuff like that. I came across him on my video search, and he was under a different name. His name was the hell was his name on that? Uh, I'm blanking on his name, but sometime it was the best self defense video I ever saw, because it was totally animalistic, going after the guy and not stopping until it's over.
Yeah.
And I saw him on CNN once, and I'm going, and they showed his name, Kelly McCann. I go, wait a minute, that's so and so. And I got out my video, and I looked at it's the same guy. Turns out he was a black ops guy for the CIA,
No, really?
and so he did his videos under an assumed name while he was still working.
Yeah.
And this guy was the real deal. He used to be on he said it was like a SWAT team, but we were a hit team. They would go after guys in other countries and take them out.
Yeah.
They were like a team of assassins,
Yeah.
and he used to do that kind of stuff. So he's a bad dude, you know.
Yeah.
And so my friend got certified in his whole line of teachings, and I trained with him a couple times and stuff. I just didn't have the time to travel because he's back east, and when I was in California, and I didn't have the time to be traveling back and forth, you know, to go get training on that. So I'd let my friend do it, and then he would show me what he learned, and I'd learn it that way, you know.
That's
But
what I found. Like I was much like you. I took UFC 1 and just rolled with it. Took all the martial arts, and then I got pretty proficient in fighting one on one. Right when we get into a cage, I can handle one on one. But then
right,
the older I got, and I'm not in bars, I'm not doing anything where I'm going to get in a physical altercation with people. My number one goal was to protect my family. So then
right,
I started training differently with a different mindset and different philosophy because like my training was, and I had a really good fight mentor. I would watch the news and, oh, this guy just got shot, doing this, going at the ATM or buying movie tickets. And then we would role play that scenario and what would you do? And I find that I still do more of that training now. I do jujitsu every day, 3 days a week, but I still do the multiple attackers, the carjackings, the stuff like that that is more realistic because
right,
I'm no longer, like I said, I'm not, if somebody comes at me well, I'm not at a bar anyway, but somewhere like that isn't my lifestyle. My lifestyle is in flip flops and board shorts, going off the grid in Mexico surfing. So I need to be aware of like situational awareness, read the cues, read the dangers, read the signs. Um, I think I'm pretty good fighting one to one if it comes down to it, but I want to avoid it obviously if I can. So that's what I put my training towards now and all my energy,
right,
learning
right,
that kind of stuff. And I like it more because it's not just pounding and sparring for freaking 2 hours, which I love to do. But I mean,
right,
at 48, my body can't take 2 hours of sparring all the time. So,
right,
but yeah, I think that's crucial is learning. I call it scenario based training is like learn if you're whatever your daily environment is. If you go to the gym in the morning or you go this, train to react in that kind of area. Like my guys always made fun of me because I used to fight and spar barefoot, like when we were just boxing. And they're like,
right.
"Why are you barefoot?" I'm like, because I'm barefoot 95% of the time. I wear flip flops. So if
I'm a
anything
surfer.
happens,
I'm a
yeah, if
surfer
anything,
dude.
exactly. So if anything kicks off, I'm usually just going to check my flip flops off, and I'm going to fight in my, and I have in my feet anyway. So I became that surfer guy who was always like, "You're the surfer, but you also like to fight." That's very. I said that's my yin and yang. The peaceful, yeah, surf. I'm in the water, chilling, no worries. And then I like the
That
fight side where I can let some
that
aggression out.
that is amazing. I tell people, I say, I used to say I'm like Clark Kent, but now I've changed that. Now I say I'm like Bruce Banner,
Yeah,
okay? Because if I'm pushed, I'll turn into the Hulk. But what I do is I actually even developed a whole line of control holds and things to teach psychiatric workers that actually involve zero force. And I
hmm,
tell people I've developed this on the one hand where there's zero force, but then on the other hand, I've developed techniques that are actual lethal force, leave the body techniques. And they go, well, how can you do that? I go, well, I'm balanced. My yin and yang are balanced because I've covered both ends of the spectrum. I don't gravitate just towards one or the other. It's depending on what the situation is. And then there's everything in between.
yeah,
So that's how I look at it. And because I've been getting older and older, I can still get out there and I'll be someone's worst nightmare for 30 seconds. You
hmm,
know, hopefully it would be over by then.
yeah,
Um, but it's not like I used to be where I could just keep going and going, where I'd get in and spar some of these maniacs, you know, in the ring, especially some of these Shotokan guys from Japan. Those guys are just, they're insane.
yeah,
They're like fighting metal pipes, you know, because their shins are all conditioned and they don't really know a lot about control. And so I took a lot of licks with those guys. But over the years, I've worked more on, and I've pretty much perfected my innocence routine where, you know, I do this a lot. Hey, you know, sorry, I apologize. I don't want to fight. And then I tell people, this is my fighting position. This is
Yeah.
my fighting stance right here. I got these, and what I've worked on is how to set somebody up using psychology where they keep their guard down as much as possible. And I also know all the legalities of legal use of force.
Hmm.
So what constitutes assault and battery and that kind of stuff. And so I tell people, if you got somebody in your face and it's really getting hot and you think something's going to happen, just get your hands up and say, look, I don't want any trouble, because what you're doing right now is making witnesses. Anybody around sees you doing this. If the cops end up showing up, they'll say, this guy was doing this. He didn't want to fight. Whereas if you go like this, then the
Yeah.
police show up, they consider it a consensual fight, and you're both going to jail.
Yeah.
So the first thing you do is you get your hands up and take about, where he doesn't really notice, just take about a step or two back.
Hmm.
So now, if you're within punching range, he might be able to punch you faster than you can react. So once you've gotten back and you're out of his range, he now has to step towards you to engage. So if you've told him, hey, look, just stay away from me, I don't want any trouble. Once you've said that, and he takes one step towards you, that is legally assault.
Hmm.
And depending on the situation, I mean, if it's a 12-year-old kid, that's different. But if it's somebody who looks like they could harm you, and you've told them stay away and you backed off and they come towards you, you don't have to wait. You can go right at them right now. And that's where I key in a lot of my techniques, is from right here. Once you step back, I tell them, you're on the ball of your foot. This guy moves 1 inch towards you, you launch. It's
Hmm.
like you're a gun that's cocked and he's pulling the trigger. And when I used to take martial arts, I had an instructor that used to practice with this, and he actually called this quick draw. He said, pick a technique, whatever technique you like, whether it's a reverse punch, a lead leg kick, whatever. You have that in your mind. That's all you're going to do. This guy flinches, you fire. And it's amazing how well that works. If that's what you're not focused on, well, he's doing this, so now I'm going to do a block and I'm going to do this, or I'm going to. That's all out of the question. You're not thinking of anything but say your reverse punch. He flinches, you fire, and
That's
chances are you're going to catch him in the middle of whatever he's doing, and you're going to hit him.
That's exactly what my mentor told me. He's because I used to run scenarios to him all the time. Some
Mhm.
I had to live, and some others I heard about. And one of them was in it, and I said, "Hey, what?" I had two or three attackers, possible attackers. They were going after another guy, and he's like, "Well, what would you have done?" I said, "Well, this guy here, I would have done this." And he's like, "Why?" He goes, "All you would have done, all you had to do was the one move that we always work on, right? A kick or front kick or whatever the scenario is." He goes, "Practice two or three moves all the time, every day before you go, whether it's jujitsu or whatever. Practice that move because that's what you're going to muscle memory. So when the shit hits the fan and it's fight, flight, freeze, you'll have
Right?
that in your arsenal. And it's just like, oh yeah, pop, 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 right? And
Boom.
most
Exactly.
most of those will end the fight, right? Because they're going to be
Yeah.
really aggressive and violent and quick. But yeah, my mentor told me the same thing, and so now that's what I teach too. Is like, hey, have that one or two moves that with it whenever whatever scenario is presented to yourself, like if it's a groin kick or if it's a throat punch or whatever that is, make sure it's your move and you practice it and it's violent and you do it
Right.
quickly, and that'll
I
usually.
Yeah, I learned that early on when I was still a white belt. Me and my other two friends that joined karate at the same time, we went to it was called a brown belt tournament, so there's no black belts in it, and it was at some grammar school somewhere, but they had a gymnasium. And so me and one of my friends, we lost and we're out fairly quickly. And but my one friend, who was like, he wasn't afraid of nothing, and so he started winning and winning. He went on and beat a brown belt to win the grand championship of this tournament. And we were all just white belts. He had one technique only, his reverse punch.
Yeah,
And I paid attention. I said, oh my God, he only had one technique. And as soon as the guy would move, he'd fire it and he'd nail him.
yeah.
And he won the whole tournament with one technique.
My
And so I tell
yeah,
people, you only need to know a small handful of techniques,
yeah.
really at the most. Do those really well. You won't need any others because if you can do two, three, four techniques instantly and really effectively, that'll take care of you.
My
You
nephew,
know,
he was a little guy at the time, like 10 or something. We went to his taekwondo tournament, and he was taller than everybody. So in the point system there. A little bop on the head meant you won. So being taller than everybody, he figured that out, and he would just walk up, pop, point, win, and even all the way to the finals. It didn't look good. It didn't, but these little kids didn't know that a bop on the head was the finisher, and he figured it
Yeah.
out. He was taller than everybody and just got in the fight distance, got inside, and clocked him on the head, and he won. So yeah, it's like Bruce Lee, your guy says, don't fear the guy who practices 1,000 kicks all the time. Fear the guy who practices one kick 1,000 times.
Exactly. And
That's the motto.
there's truth in that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny. I met a guy, well, it's been like 15 years or so into, I might have mentioned this to you when we were talking, but for anyone listening, they might find this interesting. Um, I was going to a deposition in my job as a court reporter, and I was in the conference room, and the attorney comes in and tells me, he goes, "Yeah, this guy that we're deposing today is supposedly some big wig in martial arts." And I go, "Really?" And so I looked on the paperwork for the case where it shows the court that it's in and so versus so and so, and I'm looking at this, and what was his first name? Because it's different. Oh my God, getting old's a drag, on names. Oh, okay. It showed the name of the person that we were deposing as Alvin Novak, and I'm going, "Who the hell is that?" And then I go, Al Novak. I go, "Oh crap, Al Novak." He refereed over 600 tournaments. All through the 60s and 70s, I saw him at every tournament I ever went to. Tattoos on his arms and stuff, a burly guy, but I didn't know, what his background was. And so by the time we did this deposition, I knew what his background was, and he was a 10th degree great grandmaster in kung fu. I think it was. Yeah, I think it was in kung fu, and he came in. He was 85 at the time, and he was in a wheelchair, and they wheeled him in, and I stood up and I bowed to him, and the attorneys that were there were going, "What the hell is this crap?" And I didn't care what they thought, but they brought this guy in, and I just bowed to him. I walked up and shook his hand and introduced myself and said, "I'm familiar with who you are." And I remember this guy's 85. He shook my hand, and his hand was so big and powerful in his forearms, but he wasn't squeezing. But I had the feeling that if he wanted to, he could have just squished my hand and broke it.
Yeah.
And one of this guy's things, he was an expert in close quarter breaking,
Mhm.
where from 3 or 4 inches he could break a big giant ice cube or boards or bricks or things like that. And if you look him up, he is the only man Bruce Lee would not spar in public,
Really?
because this guy's hands he had such hand speed, it rivaled Bruce Lee, and everyone knows how fast he was. This
What was
guy's
it?
hand
Alvin
speed,
what?
Al Novak, Novak. I
Yeah.
don't think there's a C in there. I think it's Novak, and you can look him up. And it's funny. He was promoted to 10th degree great grand master by my original instructor from years before.
What was he
His
being
name
charged with? Was he the defendant?
No, he was the plaintiff. Someone rear-ended him when he was driving. It
Oh,
was an
okay.
auto It was a civil case, and it was for personal injury. Somebody ran into his car,
Yeah.
and so my original instructor when I first started karate was a guy by the name of Charles Gaylord. And before he passed away, he was a 10th degree plus because he promoted this guy to 10th degree. He had originally come over from Hawaii with two other guys in the late 50s or early 60s with their Hawaiian version of martial arts. And they all opened up schools. And to this day, Charles Gaylord's schools are still, around up in Northern California. And I looked at I was in a school working out with a guy I had met, and he was one of Charles Gaylord's, it was one of his schools. They had a genealogy chart up on the wall, of showing Gaylord and all of his black belts and all of their black belts and everything. I mean, it was like 5 feet wide. And when you look at it where I started, it was like on the first notch on this whole thing,
Really?
way back. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was a blast from the past to see that, you know.
Are there any guys like when you where are you at now? South Carolina or North?
I'm in New Bern, North Carolina.
Are there anybody that you trained with back in the day that are around that area, or who do you train with now?
I just train with whoever I can get to train right now. I haven't trained with anyone here because I really don't know many people here. I mean, I'm a 74-year-old semi-retired guy, so I don't get out a lot. You know, like you say, you don't hang out on bars and stuff. I'm a homebody, you know, but
Yeah,
I go work out in the garage, and when I can get my wife's son is coming here after Thanksgiving, and he used to be in martial arts and stuff, so I'm going to be grabbing him and working out with him because I want to film some of my stuff and get it on, you know, online on some of the, you know, YouTube and some of the other places,
mhm,
because the techniques that I'm using I don't see anywhere. And it's not that I'm all great on this or that, but I've put a lot of thought into it and optimized my approach. So and I was able to show this 17-year-old kid that was my student before I moved out here. He could do a palm heel to the nose, a punch to the solar plex, and a knee to the groin in point 0.2 seconds.
whenever you talk
And
about
if you can get three quality strikes in under a half a second, it's going to give you the advantage in that fight.
yeah,
And, you know, the key to that is just, and I know that some people do this, but you don't see it much advertised or demonstrated where you do the two strikes at once, like the palm heel to the nose and the punch to the solar plex. You just do those at the same time, and that knee's right behind it. So it's just boom, and you've got those three strikes, and you can get five strikes in not much longer than that, you know. So it's just a matter of getting multiple strikes in, and then if somebody's still standing, you use this one caveman tactic that I learned, and it's just a hammer strike, just one after the other, just boom, 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 just like you're hammering a nail, you know, and you just pound them into the ground.
well, that's what I tell my son. I said, "Don't wait," because most people will say, "Well, don't throw the first punch." And I tell my son, "No, that's not accurate. If somebody's in your space and somebody looks like they're gonna throw the punch, then you have every right to act first and act violently
Right.
and all that." And I know that's always a big debate of like, "Oh, no," and I don't even know the law of it. I'm just telling him for his own protection, don't wait to get because it could be a one punch knockout that this guy has.
Exactly. Yeah.
Son or is on his ass. So I tell him no, and he's been training since he was a little guy. He's 3. He started when he was 3 with doing all this stuff, and then now he's 10. But yeah, I said, read the room, read the guy, read what's his intention. If he comes up to you and looks like he's going to hit you, don't wait till he does to find out. I say, act, take him down, do whatever you got to do. So I think
Mhm.
that's a big misnomer of people saying, like that guy you're talking about can hit you that fast. If that guy was on the evil side of things and came up to somebody and did all those three punches within a half a second, what's the other guy going to do? Wait for that to happen and then
Yeah.
react? He's already
Yeah.
taken three punches. So
Yeah. You're behind the curve at that point.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So how are you structuring this new self defense kind of tactic or martial art, or how would you describe it?
Well, I'm actually going to be advertising it as um, inner savage fighting style,
Mhm.
and I'm using the inner savage thing, and I'm going to I don't know if I got to this in my book. I'm not sure when or if it'll actually come out, but you know, anyone listening to this, they get the bonus on this. I determined what the inner savage really is. And this is my opinion as a layperson. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I've done a lot of research and reading about neurology and the fight or flight syndrome and the primitive brain, the reptilian brain, all those kinds of things. And I've determined, to my satisfaction, that what is referred to as the inner savage or primitive beast that we all have inside is just an adrenaline release.
Mhm.
It's that simple. You get the adrenaline, and a lot of people, when they get adrenaline dumped into their system, they can't control themselves, and so that's where the term, well, he's an uncontrollable beast or savage, you know, and it has nothing to do with our primal genetics from our ancestors, because according to the present day neuroscientists, that yes, we have the remnants of the reptilian brain in our mind, but it's not in control of anything. It's because since then we've developed all the rest of our mind, the cerebrums and all of the other aspects of the cerebellum and all that. And those are what guide us. And the other things are just remnants left over from our ancestors from hundreds of thousands of years ago. And so I believe that when someone is talking about the inner beast, that it's just somebody experiencing an adrenaline release, which gives them great power and focus. And so I'm going to work on with students trying, I'm going to see how this works, but I'm going to try to see if we can simulate an adrenaline release. And if you're in a fight situation, you might just get one anyway. And if you do, if you know what it is and how to handle it, then you're good to go. But I will show my students that you're face to face with somebody and stuff is starting to get heated, but you don't want anything to do with it. So you put the hands up and you step back. And at this point, you're looking calm, but inside you're spinning your mind 200 miles an hour, and you're thinking to yourself, "I'm going to rip this son of a bitch's head off," and you're just winding yourself up, but you're looking cool on the outside. So by the time anything happens, this guy's going 15 miles an hour, and right out of the blocks, you're going 100 miles an hour.
Mm.
So the kinetic energy that you can create from going at him when you're just releasing all of this pent up, mental part into your physicality, he's going to get mowed over.
Mm.
And I think that you're going to be able to replicate a lot of the symptoms or what happens with an adrenaline release in your system, because you're going to be amped up and you're going to be fast and you're going to be strong and powerful and you're going to be single-minded and focused. And a lot of that is what happens when you get adrenaline in your system. So I'm going to play with this scenario to see if that can actually be done, where you can replicate an adrenaline release even without it. So,
Mm.
I have too much time on my hands to think about these things.
I saw an interesting documentary. I'm not sure if it was on Netflix or what, but with Henry Rollins. He's a punk guy, Black Flag, and then he became an actor. But he has that very aggressive look. He's all tatted up, and he did a
Uh-huh.
documentary on how can you distinguish who has, just by looking at him, not putting it in a scenario yet, but how can you tell that person has or fight out of the fight or flight? That person has flight. What's the biochemistry in their head that makes one person different than the other? And can you distinguish who they are before? Like, how do you get elite soldiers? How do you know if they have fight or flight? And so, him being an aggressive person, he always likes to fight. They took his blood or however they were testing him, and it turns out, obviously everybody thought that he would be the fighter. He had the flight biochemistry, and it was a really good, interesting documentary. But it's hard
Mhm.
to tell, and there's no way you really can tell who would have fight or flight. Because even soldiers, there's some soldiers who have trained their whole life and then get in a firefight, and then they curl up in the fetal position and they don't know how to, don't want to act. And so,
I've yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I've thought of that for years, that, you never know, and I think there's almost a saying about this, you never know who's gonna step up to the plate until the stuff hits the fan.
Hmm.
And then you'll be surprised all the time at who will step up and take action versus those that will either run or freeze. I saw a old war movie when I was a kid, and I'll never forget this one thing. There was this group of army guys, and they were like hanging around in a big trench or something like that. And there was this one wimpy guy that they were always playing tricks on. And so one of the guys, uh, what he did is he got off to the side. And there was about six of them there, and so he tossed a hand grenade in the middle of all of them and said, "Grenade!" And all of those other guys, I don't know if all of them were in on the joke or not, but this one guy that they'd made fun of dove onto the grenade,
Wow.
and I'll never forget that, because all those guys looked at him differently after that,
Yeah.
because he had risked his own life to save them
Yeah.
after all the crap they'd given him. But he was somebody you would always expect, well, he's the somebody who's going to freeze or flee,
Yeah.
you know, not stand up to it and fight. and he's the guy, he dove right on the grenade.
Yeah.
And those guys all felt really like really bad after that.
As they should.
Yeah,
What motivates you? As you said earlier, you're older guy, right? What
right.
motivates you to keep going? And because I'm 48, and most of my well, I have a fight crew that I train with all the time, but a lot of my other friends don't understand why I keep putting my body through this. What
Uh,
motivates you to keep going and keep pushing and driving?
what motivates me is when I see the news. I hate people that victimize innocent people. It pisses me off.
Mhm.
And so I train to keep myself in the condition where whoever I'm with, my wife or anyone else, I can protect if someone comes up. Even being 74, I'm still in really good shape because I work out all the time and everything. I'm not your usual 74-year-old.
Mhm.
Most of the guys I see that are 74 have canes or walkers or something. And I'll look at somebody that's anywhere from 65 and older, which is still way younger than me. And the way I evaluate them is I'll look at them and think, if I punched him right in the stomach, he'd fold over like an old card table, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and that's most of the time because I can hit like a truck still. But
yeah.
I'll look at somebody, and that's how I'll evaluate them. I'll look at them and say, "Man, I could take him out with one punch."
Brian
Um,
Callen, a comedian, says whenever he meets somebody, his wife takes him to a new event, and he says, "Okay, I got to meet a new guy." He walks up to the new guy. He's smiling and shaking his hand. But he goes, "In our mind, in every guy's mind, can I beat this guy? How would I do it? How would I destroy this guy?" And I go, "That's
that's
100% accurate because I do the same thing. Big guys,
exactly what
small
I
guys.
do.
Yeah, I'm always looking like, how would I take him out? I mean, I know I can. I've been training my whole life for this, and like I would do
Yeah,
this, I would do that. Oh, he looks weak here. I do that, and
yeah,
it's funny because I think we all do it.
yeah. Well, I do the same thing. I do scenarios. I'll be walking down the street, and some guy's coming the other direction and passing me, and I'm just visualizing him attacking me. What would I do? And he doesn't know it, but I hit him about 5 times before he passed me.
Right.
And same thing with guys standing in an elevator. I'm thinking this guy doesn't know that I just thought of 3 different ways to take him out. And you just do that. I've never gone around looking for fights or anything like that, but I still, for like 10 years, 10 to 15 years actually, I used to put on assault prevention seminars for groups of women.
Mhm.
And I didn't charge anything for it. Whenever there was a group that was interested, I would go do it. And I would tell them, I said, if you listen to what I'm telling you and keep it in mind, you can probably eliminate 95% chance of being assaulted because most assaults are preventable. And that just leaves a small percentage. No one's perfectly safe all the time. But when you read stories, and I've read police reports and all kinds of things, uh, where most assaults, somebody said, "Well, yeah, I didn't have a good feeling about this guy, or I knew I shouldn't have walked into this bar, or I knew I shouldn't have did." They all say that.
That's like
99% of these
yeah,
people do.
that's in The Gift of Fear where he says, kinda like we were talking about earlier, reverse engineer it. When you walk through victims and interview victims and they're like, "I never saw it coming, I should." Then they go he sits there and he listens to him and he says, "Are you sure there were no signs?" "Well, he did show aggression this one time," or "He sent a vulgar text message," or there are cues, there are signs, there are things that, maybe didn't lead up to a significant attack, but there's signs that you probably should have taken in and said, "Hey, I
Right.
need to stay away from this person." So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I could go for a whole nother hour on this subject.
yeah,
I
but
think I'll send you a copy of my handbook. It's about 23 pages. I think you'll find it very interesting.
yeah,
It was
definitely.
it's the guide that I used for my seminars, and it's all based on true stories.
Yeah.
And some of them are really scary.
Well, that's what I say a lot in the book, a lot in the posts that I make is I'm not trying to get a UFC fighter. I'm not trying to make him a champion for 10 years. I'm not trying to get people to that level. I'm trying to get the normal person. Like I was at a high school game, football game with my wife on Friday, and our kid's 10. It was one of her friends was a cheerleader. So I went to a high school game. I haven't been to a high school game since I was in high school. And I was
Right.
amazed at how overweight and out of shape the dads were. I'm sitting
Oh yeah.
there. I talked to my wife. I'm like, that guy's younger than me, and look at him. He couldn't run to save his life. I mean, this is pathetic." And she says, "Yeah." I said, "Look at all these dads here who can't do
Oh,
sh." And that's who I want to motivate to get off their ass and go train. Whatever it is, whether it's karate, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, just get off their ass because they are the first responders. I believe in the police and I know call 911 when you can, but you can't say, don't, the guy breaks in your house. Hold on, I'm calling 911. Now you sit there and wait until the cops come. No, you need to act. You need to have your weapons. You need to do all this and
right.
you're your first responder. And it's unfortunate, like you said, you get angry about it. It's unfortunate that I'd say 95% of the population do not know how to defend themselves. They don't know how to be their own first responder. And it's frustrating.
Yeah, I'd say that probably the hardest thing for me to train someone in is how to deal with fear,
Mhm.
with real violence, because most people think they know what violence is, and they don't. And like somebody will, I remember someone asked me once, "Well, what's the difference between martial arts and self-defense?" And I go, "Well, okay, here you go. Martial arts, you're in a studio with nice pads on the floor. You're probably in your bare feet, wearing your uniform with a different colored belt, and you all bow to each other, and you always wait for the other guy to be ready before you throw your punch so he can do his thing." I
Mhm.
go, self defense is you just took some money out of an ATM at night, which you're stupid for being there, but it could happen in the daytime too. You turn around and some thug is there. He grabs you by the throat, slams you into the wall, puts his face right next to yours, and says, "Give me your money or I'll effing kill you."
Mhm.
And you will wet your pants if you're not ready for that. And
Yeah.
I said, that's the difference. That is self defense. Can you handle that situation?
Yeah.
Not can you bow and stuff
Yeah.
in a nice dojo, you know?
That's what I tell people, exact same thing. I said, there's honor, there's respect when you're fighting another opponent. When you're in the dojo, in your gym, there's all of that. If I accidentally hit somebody, "Oh, are you okay? I didn't mean to do that." And
Right.
it's not, I don't have honor. I'm gonna rip your ear off, I'm gonna kick you in the balls, I'm gonna bite your nose off. There's no rules. Once you've decided to cross that line and put me and my family in any kind of danger, I'm not worried if your balls are gonna hurt when I kick them. I'm not worried about if you're leaving with both your ears. My main
Right.
objective is to get home and have dinner with my family. So they've made that decision. They unfortunately
Exactly.
they made that decision when they want to do something stupid and try to take something of mine. Because I don't know if they're what level of crazy they are. If they just like, "Oh, I kind of wanted your watch. I didn't want to get the shit kicked out of me for it." Well, I
You
don't know that. Or you have a knife or a weapon, and now my life is dead, and my family's fatherless
right.
and friendless.
You can't wait. You
Yeah,
you you ca you have to engage.
yeah.
And it's funny, you just mentioned something that reminded me. I used to say this one thing in my seminars with the women, and at one time I had like 100 women in the seminar. And I said, "I can tell you guys right now how to avoid any rape, and you all know how to do it right now, and I guarantee it will work." And they're all going, and I said, "How many in here would do anything to prevent yourself from being raped? If there was something you could do, is there anything you wouldn't do to prevent it?" And they all raise their hands. "No, I'll do whatever." And so they're like, "Okay, what is it?" I said, "Okay, well, rape by its very nature is a crime of closeness." I said, "As soon as you get close enough to the guy, you just move in slow motion and you reach up, maybe like you're going to kiss him or something, and bite his friggin' nose off."
Mhm.
And they all sit back in their chairs, and I say, "I guarantee if you bite somebody's nose off, they'll be thinking a lot of things, but raping you won't be one of them."
Yeah.
Okay? They will panic, they'll freak out, and then you can tell them they got 20 minutes to get them and their nose to an ER before the tissue dies and they're noseless forever, you know? And then they all start freaking out. "Well, I couldn't do that." And I go, "Well, that's why I'm telling you." I said, "You need to think about this in advance." I said, "The worst place to make a life or death decision is when you're in a life or death situation. You need to think in advance. What will you do? What won't you do? And if you don't think you can do that, that's fine. At least you know it.
Mm.
But remember, and I guarantee you, you will never forget what I just told you. So if you ever did find yourself in that situation, guess what's going to pop into your mind?
Yeah.
Bite the nose off, you know?
Well, I put on a dummy suit and let the girls go at it with me, And so many times they do something violent and go, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" And I keep attacking. I'm like, "Don't say sorry. Keep going. Like, this is what you
Exactly.
need to learn. There is no sorry, apologies, or anything. When you're being attacked, that person already made the choice to harm you. You can't say sorry or you're worried about them not having kids later. You need to be violent and you need to do it harshly and violently and with no remorse. And
Exactly.
some of the strongest girls I've trained are the ones who started very timid, like, "Oh, I don't know if I," and then by the end of it, they're kicking the shit out of me, and I'm like, "Okay, okay, okay. You're good, you're good. You got what it takes." But they need to
Well,
find that. They need to find that inner savage, right? They need to
yeah,
find that
exactly.
person to
Yeah.
come out.
Well, back in the 80s, I actually, do you remember ever hearing something called BAM, Bay Area Model Mugging?
Mm-mm.
It was something that was started back, I think, in the 80s. It's where the guys got the big old padded heads
Mhm.
and the padded outfits, and they
Yeah,
had these self-defense classes for women, and they wore all this protection so the women could knee them right up the middle, elbow them in the head, all this stuff. So that was called BAM, Bay Area Model Mugging, and it was an international movement at one point. I don't know if they're still doing it, but I actually went out and I bought an NFL football helmet, $165, and this was in the 80s.
mm,
And then I bought all kinds of what's called closed cell foam and wrapped it around it, taped it around it with duct tape. And so I had a helmet this big and put it on, and I got a super steel reinforced cup and padding and stuff. And I would do self defense classes with women and let them haul off and hit me. And even with that big pad on, they palm healed me in the face.
oh,
I'd
yeah,
have a headache for 2 days.
yeah.
You know, even with all that foam padding, man, it's still
It
palm
rings
heels is a powerful strike.
The first time I was in Krav Maga, and the guy says, "Hey, can you volunteer for the women's thing?" I said, "Yeah, that's fine." Well, being the first guy, they put me in the dummy suit, and I'm like, "How hard can these women kick?" You know, usually when I'm fighting, I'm bobbing, I'm moving, I'm not taking a full brunt of a
Right,
kick or a hit, and
right.
I just had to stand there and take it. And man, the smallest women were the most fierce and the hardest hitters. I took that thing off, and it didn't matter how much padding I had down there. I was still feeling it. I said, "I'm done with this. I'm never doing it
Yeah,
again." Lo and behold,
yeah,
I put that thing on 1,000 times after. But I still try to, parry a little bit and try to get out of the way and not take a full brunt to the head. But they
yeah,
definitely it rings your bell for sure.
yeah, I found that out. I was surprised. I thought, "Oh, I'm gonna be protected now," and, oh, hell no. I stopped doing that shortly after, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
So
it's good to get them out, and have them realize their potential because a lot of them think they're like even my wife, she's 100 and something pounds, and she's like, "What can I possibly do?" And in the book, I think I talked about it, but there was a scenario where I was watching, and I think it's on YouTube now because it's so funny. But a guy, he's about 250, 6'4", 6'5". He's trying to have people adopt kittens, and so he has his kitten on a leash, and he's just like, "Hey, adopt Fluffy." And all of a sudden, Fluffy doesn't want to be held anymore. And Fluffy goes crazy on this guy. 6'5", 250-pound guy starts screaming like a little girl because it was on a leash. So it got wrapped around his leg and then it dug its claw into his balls and he's howling. And I use that as an analogy like this little cat probably weighed 5 pounds, had this guy crying. I said, doesn't matter how much you weigh, there's always ways to make any size person cry and moan
right,
like a newborn. It doesn't matter. There's pressure points. There's things you can do. So I don't ever want to hear somebody say, "Well, I'm only 5'2" and 100 pounds. I can't do much." And
yeah.
I always
How big
by
is
any
a
of the, what's that?
how big is a badger, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
And they'll take it to anybody. But I try to show women the different ways to get to the eyes,
Hmm.
because the eyes are the one thing nobody can develop where
Yeah.
you can resist it. And I learned about the eyes watching a guy holding a little baby once. And here's this big grown man holding a little baby, and you know how sometimes a baby will do that drop reflex and just shoot their arms out?
Yeah.
This little baby flipped his arms out and caught this guy in the eye with one of his little baby tiny fingers. And
Yeah.
this guy's going, "Oh my God, here's somebody, quick, take the baby." And he was like immobilized, you
Yeah.
know, he was
That's all
taken
it
out.
takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all you need to do, and these women will say, "Well, I can't stick my fingers into someone's eye." And I go, "No, no, you don't have to. Think of this as the hammer and the egg. How hard do you have to hit an egg with a hammer to break it? Not at all. All you have to do is touch. There's something called autokinematics, and I
Mhm.
teach people to use that. You just flip your fingers up towards where their eyes are. You don't even have to hit the eye.
Yeah.
They will instinctively pull both hands up to the eyes. So now, if you know that, just flip your fingers up to the area of his eyes. He'll take both hands up and then knee him right in the groin.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
what, like when you were saying keeping your hands up like this, that's what I use. Is like you do a little flick to the eyes or the nose or
right,
the throat, and you get harder and harder. It doesn't take
right.
much to have a guy
Yeah,
flinch or anybody in that matter. Just
yeah, and their hands are going to go up like that, and then just crush their testicles with something.
yeah, yeah,
Because their hands are up out of the way, and they won't see it coming, but they'll feel it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, David, like I said, we could do this forever. I usually try to keep these for about an hour, but I appreciate you coming on today. This is great. If you want people to reach out to you, how would you have people if they want to have any questions or sign up for a class or anything?
Um, well, they could
Or if
email
not,
me.
yeah,
They could email. I'm trying to think because I just got my new email is mysavage@gmail.com.
there you go. I like it.
And so, yeah, but not too many people that are listening to you are probably anywhere near where I'm at in North Carolina.
No,
But
I had a gal on. She is a firearms instructor, and she's in North Carolina.
oh, really?
I have them everywhere. Yeah, I have
Hey, you
a
can,
group called
yeah,
Savage
well,
Syndicate.
yeah, talk to her if she's interested in any training. I do one-on-one stuff for free. I just enjoy doing it so much. I
Yeah.
mean, if I'm going to get classes going, then that's something different. But if you know somebody that's in this area, if she's interested, depending on how far away she is, I'll show her whatever she wants to know.
Where do they call Surf City? She's in the place that they call Surf City.
I'm not. I don't think that's that far. I think that's by the ocean.
Well, I
I
know it
think
is.
I'm
She lives by the beach, and because Huntington Beach out here was called Surf City, so she
right.
said we moved from one surf city to the next. And I forget the city she lives in, but I do know they call it Surf City. But yeah,
I
she
do.
does. She does. She helps women get their or anybody, but she's always posting about women getting their concealed carry. So maybe she could roll that into a self defense for the women out there. That might be something.
Or my seminar would be great also.
Yeah,
Because if you can avoid it, you don't have to deal with it.
yeah,
But I think that we're probably within an hour or so of each other. If she's at, I think Surf City is about 45 minutes from where I'm at, I believe.
yeah. I'll reach out to her and let her know, and then maybe you guys can get connected or something.
Yeah, and feel free to give her my other email just in case I just gave the wrong one. I think that's what it. I just got it, so I haven't
Yeah.
even used it
I'll
yet.
look at the one that we were going back and forth on, and then I'll share with her, and I'll put it in
Yeah,
the
you
podcast.
can give her that one. You can give her that one, and
Okay.
tell her to feel free to get a hold of me. And I will send you some books to read.
Yeah,
And if you get a chance to read any of them, let me know what you think.
I will definitely do so. I'm a big reader. I love to just sit back with the book, and I try to read at least 30 minutes a day. That's the goal
Okay,
anyway. So yeah,
okay.
send me whatever you want, and then I'd love to have it and give you my thoughts on it. But again, thank you very much for coming on. We connected right away. I think this is our third or I don't know, second or third conversation, and I really
Yeah,
enjoyed talking to you. So thank you for taking the
yeah,
time to
yeah. And we just scratched the surface.
right? We could probably do this for a week.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, getting on some of the other stuff, I have so many like cool stories and just other things.
Yeah,
Um, so anyway, it was great talking to you, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
perfect. Thank you, David. I appreciate it, and I'll send you all the links
Okay,
and everything to let you share this with whoever you would like.
okay, thanks. You
All right.
take care for now.
Thanks, David. See ya.
Okay, bye bye.